Welcome into episode 450 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Today, we are going to be answering some mailbag questions. So thank you to those who submitted them. And if you are listening right now or watching and you want to submit them as well, for future episodes, you can comment on YouTube. You can tweet at us individually on Twitter, tweet at the Skate Pod, or email us at skatepod@weei.com. Opening shifts today, I wanted to talk about the Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Finals between the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers. That series is now tied at 2 games apiece after a amazing comeback by the Oilers. They take the lead late in the third period after being down 0-3 to take a 4-3 lead. The Panthers tie it in the last minute of the game, dying 20 seconds, I believe, and then the Oilers win it in overtime. But of course, the big takeaway, and I'm going to give the stage to my two co-hosts here, is the power couple that was in attendance that they can't stop talking about pre-recording today.
Actually, it ended up more of us talking about Jeff Skinner than it did, because and all the jokes about Taylor Swift being there to watch Jeff Skinner in the playoffs because he finally cracked the lineup in the series. And then that ended up in a conversation of who's taller, Jeff Skinner or Taylor Swift, and why they didn't end up working as a couple, which it turns out that she didn't really know who he was in the first place. But that was what we talked about. I guess we can keep talking about it if you want.
I don't know if our listeners want us to do that. I wonder where the Skate Pod audience comes down, because it's like some fans love like the Taylor Swift talk, and obviously her fans like tune in just because she's at the game. And then we see all the people on social media who are also like, who cares? Like, why is she even there? They can't keep showing her, like, I just want to watch hockey. And it's like, all right, like, relax. She is a mega star, and if we're being honest, like, quite frankly, a bigger star than most hockey games, even the Stanley Cup final, get. So as
you can tell, Scott is a big Swiftie.
I'm not a big like, I like Taylor Swift. I like her
are.
music. There's no shame in that. She writes a great pop song. Like,
yeah, well, when we were driving up to Montreal, we got a lot of Taylor Swift in my playlist. The year that we took my car was just mostly Taylor Swift and Harry Styles. So,
well, what people don't realize watching on YouTube is that before every episode, Scott has to take down his Taylor Swift poster behind him so people can't see it. But I promise you, it's there before the red light goes. I can tell you that.
Life-size cardboard cutout.
Yeah.
I actually, you know who I did once have a cardboard cutout of was David Hasselhoff with a surfboard when he was doing Cumberland Farm commercials. It's probably still out. I should try to find it. I should put that on the
back. God, Scott, that is the weirdest thing I've ever heard. Why? Wait, why? Did you steal it?
No, that they were a WEI sponsor at the time, and I just like
yeah.
I just like tweeted at them. I was like, "Can you send me a David Hasselhoff cutouts?" Thinking like they never would, and they actually sent me one.
Oh boy. Well, okay, we've probably completely lost the audience at this point, 3 minutes in. So I promise we'll move on to the things that matter here. But yeah, obviously, the celebrities in attendance. Hey, one of T Swift's magnitude, I'm sure it can help grow the game, right? I mean, why not? I mean, help work with the NFL. Not that the NFL need much help in that department, but there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Her favorite player is actually Brad Marchand. So
really,
I'm totally making that up, but
all right. Well, anyway, guys, your opening shifts, please.
So mine's about the NHL awards, which a bunch of them had been rolled out over like the last couple of weeks, but they saved the big ones for Thursday night. They announced them before the game, and Connor Hellebuyck wins the double, wins the Vezina and the Hart Trophy. First goalie to do that since Carey Price in 2015. A little bit of surprise, very close race there for the MVP. He just edged out Leon Draisaitl, Nikita Kucherov, and Nathan McKinnon. A lot of support there, a lot of first place votes as well. So really ended up being one of the more wide open Hart races in a while. I had a vote, and I had Hellebuyck fourth on my ballot, so I was a little out of step there, I guess. But Leon Draisaitl was my winner. And as it relates to the Bruins, really the only place any Bruin popped up was David Pastrnak making the second All-Star team. He was the second right wing behind Nikita Kucherov. I was a little surprised to see Pastrnak only finished 11th in Hart Trophy voting. I did have him 5th on my ballot. And, I think it would be easier for people to look at that and think, oh, Boston bias or whatever. But I look at the season he had, finishing tied for 4th in the NHL in points on the team that he was on, with very little support, without a good power play to rack up points. I just thought the season Pastrnak had was incredible and deserved recognition. And to me, he was one of the top 5 players in the game, and was for a while the only reason the Bruins were even hanging around the playoff hunt. We know, obviously, they sold a ton at the deadline and then tanked from there. But I was a little surprised to see he didn't get more love and ended up finishing outside the top 10 in voting.
I do think that among players, they recognized, and other staffs recognized what Pasta was doing on a really bad team. And like how, I think, was it Marchand before he got traded that said like he should win MVP or something? Like, I remember players bringing it up unprompted just to give Pastrnak a compliment for being the most consistent player last season, and on a team that.
Yeah, I know McAvoy said that too. Like, said when he was asked about Pastrnak while McAvoy's still out injured, he said, like, I'm not trying to diss anyone else, but to me, he's the most valuable player this season.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think around the league, and obviously these are his teammates, but it's definitely, I'm surprised that overall he ended up at 11th. But Scott, who else did you have on your ballot for the other awards too? Because obviously I saw that you had some BU guys, but you threw in some BC guys on your all rookie team. And who did you have for just the rest of the ballot that you put out?
I can pull it up. Do we want to wrap up opening shifts first while I pull it up?
Well, while you pull it up, Scott, I just want to ask a quick question as well. Initially, I was going to ask about MVP, but I guess in general, and this is putting you both on the spot, but can either of you think about an example of a player winning a major individual regular season award that was on a non-playoff team off the top of your head?
The one I always think of was one of A-Rod's MVPs came when he was in Texas, and they were under 500.
Well, I guess I was speaking more so NHL, but okay, that's one out.
Yeah,
that's one.
NHL, I imagine it would be. Nothing comes to mind immediately. Yeah, it is pretty much always someone who's in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's just tough. It's tough to do. Tough to do.
Even, and usually it's one of the better teams in the league. Like the year Taylor Hall won, that was a New Jersey squeaked in. I think they were the 8th seed. Mm-hmm. And he won largely in part because they made it. Like, had that swung the other way and they missed the playoffs the final week, I don't think there's any chance Taylor Hall would have won that MVP.
So do you think that voters need to adjust their mentalities when voting to just like who the most valuable player was for their team? I know that when a team doesn't make the playoffs, people have the tendency to say, well, what did it matter that they didn't get to a certain level? But are they doing players around the league? And this is beyond Pastrnak, but
I'm trying. Did Connor McDavid, was one of his early wins, did it come a year that Edmonton missed?
Maybe. I mean, they were brutal for a long time, and he's obviously always been spectacular. I mean, I understand when voters are voting for MVPs, it makes sense that the best players and the best teams. Like, I get all that, but it shouldn't discredit somebody who had an outstanding season on a team that didn't make it, because hockey is a team sport. So there's only so much one player can do. I get that's kind of the nature of the MVP part, but there's only so much one person can do. But anyway, I'm not surprised that Pastrnak wasn't in the top 3 for that reason. But I was just curious if anybody's ever won a major award, Selke, Vezina, whatever. Obviously, the Rocket Richard can be won, but that's total amount of goals. So, that's not really subjective.
Yeah, I mean, like I think for me it factors in, and I would say now obviously I could see a situation that changed my mind, but I think it would be unlikely for me to have number one on my ballot be a player on a non-playoff team, but we get to vote for 5 players. And like to me, there's room somewhere in the top 5 for a guy on a non-playoff team. Like I don't think all 5 votes that I submit have to be guys on a playoff team. Who the person I put number one, probably going to be on a playoff team. Again, I'm not totally opposed to having a number one who missed the playoffs, but I guess I would have to see that situation play out and
Right.
see like who else had a great season and how much do they separate by and all that.
Like if somebody had 150 points and their team missed the playoffs, it's kind of tough to ignore that, right?
Yeah,
and
like no one else had more than like 110 or something. Yeah, like that would be tough to ignore.
So I'm certainly not saying right now that Pastrnak should have won MVP. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm more so just generally curious, like if that's ever happened before. But in any event,
the Oilers did at least make the playoffs every year. That either McDavid or Draisaitl won. A couple they weren't very good. They got one year they got swept. One year they lost in 5 in the first round, but they were at least in the playoffs.
And Scott, just because my opening shift actually really is unrelated to this, why don't you just, if you have your ballot up, let us know what else you voted for.
So yeah, I mean we get to vote on a lot. The only ones that writers don't vote on are the Jack Adams, which is broadcasters, and the Vezina, which is general managers. But yeah, quickly, Hart, I had Draisaitl 1, Kucherov 2, McKinnon 3, Hellebuck 4, Pastrnak 5. Norris, Cale Makar was an easy 1. He ends up winning. I had Werenski 2, Quinn Hughes 3, Josh Morrissey 4, Thomas Harley of the Stars 5. Calder, Lane Hudson 1. He ends up winning the award. I had Celebrini 2, Matvei Michkov 3, Dustin Wolf 4. Dustin Wolf ended up finishing second, and I really debated that for a long time, but ultimately I knew Hudson was my number 1, and I was pretty sure he was gonna win. Selke, I had Alexander Barkov first. He ends up winning. Sam Reinhart second, Anthony Cirelli third, Adam Lowry 4, Seth Jarvis 5. Those are the big awards, so I'll leave it at that. I won't go through all my all-star teams unless people are interested. But yeah, so most of the awards I had, the winner was my number 1, except for Hart, except for the biggest one, where like I said, I had Hellebuck 4th.
Yeah, I mean that is still, this year was more subjective than some years. So like you said, Cale Makar was an obvious one. Go UMass, by the way. And then Lane Hudson is your guy at BU. But yeah, I think it seemed like Lane Hudson was going to get that for a good chunk of the season. It felt like that, especially, when I had my riveting interview with him earlier this year. I got the sense he was going to win it. I was like, he's got this.
That really propelled him into the spotlight.
I
think put him on people's radar.
It really did. I don't think I showed the picture on this podcast, but I showed you guys. It makes me laugh every time I see it. He just looks so not happy to talk to me. But he's actually a nice kid. So I'll say that. He's just nervous, I think. But yeah, no, good for those guys. And I think I agree with most of what you're saying as well, the way that you voted. So, and of course you had Macklin second in there, right? You said you had Macklin second?
Yeah, but I debated that for a while. Like I easily could have put Dustin Wolf second. I mean, he had a really good season for the Flames and was the biggest reason they were even in the playoff hunt. So like for a rookie to do that is impressive. Even though I will say like he's had some NHL exposure, he's played some games, he's been around. I do think like Macklin's, not that this should necessarily affect the vote, but like Macklin Celebrini doing what he did as a true 18-year-old rookie, like first year eligible to play in the league, it is just extremely impressive.
Now, Scott, if you had a vote for 1980s comedies, where would Spaceballs rank? Because I don't know if you saw the news on a Spaceballs 2 that is in works.
What about Happy Gilmore 2?
Well, that's Scott's '90s comedy ballot. But
yeah, Happy Gilmore was one of my absolute favorites as a kid. Obviously gonna watch the new one. A little nervous to see if it's actually any good, but you know what? Like I like Spaceballs, but it for some reason it never really clicked as like an absolute favorite of mine. Even though like I am a Star Wars fan, so yeah, like I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, oh, this is gonna be like right up my alley because I didn't see it until I was a little older. I might have even been in college the first time I watched it, and I was like, oh yeah, like that was good, but I don't know, like, maybe it just didn't hit me at the right time. You know, obviously I wasn't alive when it came out, but um, I'll have to revisit it before the second one, see if it clicks anymore.
Wait, Scott, I thought you were 55. You weren't born when this came out?
I'm 25. What are you talking about?
All right. Well, we'll have to have Scott give us his ballot later on 80s comedies. But Bridget, why don't we get to your opening shift?
All right, so totally unrelated to what we talked about so far, which is and it's something that we did bring up on our mock GM episode series, because this is actually somebody that we had on our roster who's not currently on the Bruins NHL roster, but Michael DiPietro is the Bruins, AHL starter for Providence. And Kevin Weeks had a report that came out 2 days ago that he put out on Twitter, which was he says DiPietro has opened plenty of eyes and is seen as the top goalie available among Group 6 free agents. Plenty of NHL clubs I've spoken to have expressed their interest in him. And so basically, Scott, you might be able to help here, but Group 6 free agents has to do with you age out of your protection, right? So he just turned 26. And he was on the AHL All-Star. He was in the AHL All-Star game. And so we talked about him as being the Bruins' backup goalie next year to just shed some of the cap from Korpisalo. And we thought he was probably good enough to be an NHL backup. So he was in our plans for the Bruins next season, but we can discuss, what do you think happens with him? Does he even, does he end up with Boston? Does he end up out of the system altogether because there's interest?
Well, I want to throw it to Scott because I saw you had some discourse online with some Bruins fans, and some of which that were kind of up in arms, like how are the Bruins letting this player potentially go without seeing what they had at the NHL level, and I saw you going back and forth with some people, Scott, just about that. So if you want to elaborate.
Yeah, I mean, to make clear, like off the top, as part of my plan, I had trading Korpisalo this offseason to free up salary and then making DiPietro the backup. So like that is what I would do. I'm on board with fans saying do that. Now that requires someone out there having interest in Korpisalo, because what I'm not interested in doing, and where I would disagree with some fans who want to do this, is I'm not trading Korpisalo and an asset just to dump his contract. Like if someone wants to give me a 4th round pick for him and there's some salary retention, like, okay, I'll do that. But I'm not trading Korpisalo and a 3rd round pick just to get rid of him. Like, no, I'll just keep him. Yes, he's overpaid. Yes, they probably should have used him more last year, but it's not, he's essentially making like the going rate for a good backup goalie. So I would just keep him in that case and not give up a draft pick to get rid of him. But yeah, there were fans like up in arms over the possibility of DiPietro just walking away and the Bruins losing him for nothing. To which my point was basically like, I just think those fans have a much higher opinion of Michael DiPietro than a lot of people around the league. This is a goalie who's been on waivers twice, who could have been claimed for nothing and wasn't. He's 26 years old. This isn't a young prospect. This is someone who's the same age as Jeremy Swayman. So, to me, it's like, if Michael DiPietro were going to be a good NHL goalie, it probably would have happened by now. And I still think he can be a good backup, but like I can't lose my mind over them losing a backup. Like, it's just that there's bigger battles to fight than that. But yeah, I guess there's some fans out there who have a very high opinion of DiPietro and think he's going to become something because he did have a really good season in the AHL. I would just note that it's easier for a 26-year-old goalie to have a good season in the AHL than a 21 or 22-year-old legitimate prospect.
Yeah, and I'll just read the Group 6 thing. So it says a Group 6 unrestricted free agent is a player who's 25 years or older, has completed 3 or more professional seasons, and has an expiring contract, and has played less than 80 NHL games. And those players can negotiate with any team without restrictions. So basically,
yeah, I think it's a lower number for goalies. I don't have it up. Maybe you have it there.
I just have the 80. Yeah, you're right. It must be lower for goalies because they split time. Like they can't play the same way. Yeah, a forward would play the season. But so yeah, that could throw a wrench in just the opportunity to maybe look into trading some of Korpisalo's money away. So that might be off the table is kind of my point with seeing Kevin Weeks reporting that other teams are interested in him. Good for him if he gets a shot in the NHL. And even if that's not with the Bruins, obviously not great for their AHL team either. They still have Brennan Bussey, but isn't he also a free agent?
Yeah, he's also a Group 6 UFA.
So
they do have the Czech goalie they signed, Simon Zajic, I think is how you pronounce his last name. He's 23 years old, so he'll be over. He's probably an AHL guy, would be my guess.
Well, they got guys in the system. Svedback, I believe, is going to be at Providence for another year. Philip Svedback,
Providence College.
What did I say?
Well, I'm just clarifying.
So yeah, Providence College. Sorry, yes, the college. Yes. In my mind, I just know that, so I didn't clarify. But and then Albin Boya, I believe, from Maine, is going to be at their development camp again. So
yeah, but he is not part of their system. He is
not. No, he is undrafted, so he is just available. And the Bruins had interest in him. He's a good goalie. He won the Hockey East championship this year. So I could see them trying to once he finishes college, which who knows, maybe he's already considering leaving after this season, or maybe he wants to play another year at Maine, but could end up in the system if they want to sign him and get him to Providence. So
yeah, I think Boya probably signs after next season. There were teams who wanted to sign him this past season, but he chose to go back to Maine for another year.
You mean this offseason he signs with someone? Or do you mean next offseason?
After this coming season.
Okay, gotcha.
So guys, I want to get your opinions quickly on some speculation from NHL insiders that I've seen this morning, trickling out from last night and potentially this morning as well. But Brad Marchand, Greg Wyshynski on the sheet said that he's going to go to likely the highest bidder. Doesn't matter the team. Well, I guess that's the nature of unrestricted free agency, so nothing too surprising there potentially. But the one I really wanted to talk about was Sam Bennett, because David Pagnotta on NHL Network said that Bennett is pretty much locked in to stay in Florida, and that they're talking around 8 times 8. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. But I think it does appear likely that the Panthers recognize Bennett's value as well, and that Bennett would probably maybe take a little bit less to stay in a situation that he loves both on and off the ice.
Yeah, because I think his value, like if he wanted to cash in, he could cash in for more than that. So that would be somewhat of a hometown discount, probably just because of the playoffs that he's had. We talked about, there was a report that he might get as much as 10 million on the free market, but yeah, why wouldn't he want to stay in Florida? So that makes sense.
Yeah, I believe there were reports during the season that Florida and Bennett had some talks and that their offer was not lowball, but was seen as lower than Bennett thought he was going to be able to get. So I imagine if they're coming up to 8 million, like that's probably a pretty sizable jump. And maybe that's closer to a place that makes Sam Bennett happy. It also tells me that the Panthers are making Bennett their priority, right? Like we've mentioned that they have 3 big UFAs, Bennett, Marchand, Aaron Ekblad. And I leaned towards maybe Ekblad would be their priority because they have more young help up front than they do in defense. Like even a guy like Mackie Samoskevich, who had an encouraging rookie year, but now isn't playing in the playoffs. Like he projects as a middle 6 forward for them. Anton Lundell can slide up to second line center, if they lose Bennett. So I wondered if they would prioritize Ekblad just for that. He's also one of their team leaders. But it seems like Bennett's now the priority, and they'll bump up Seth Jones to their top pairing and then figure out the defense behind them if they're unable to keep Ekblad.
And Pagnotta also had a report on Ekblad as well, saying that Aaron Ekblad likely headed to free agency. Florida want him at less than his current 7.5 AAV, something in the 6 range. And he said that on NHL Network as well. So
yeah, and that just feels like that feels like asking him to take a hometown discount. And Ekblad's like still in his prime years. I think he's 29, right? Like he hasn't even turned 30 yet. So
a lot of miles though. A lot of miles.
True.
It's a big injury too.
Yeah.
So
I can see the hesitation there, but like I imagine someone, if he goes to the open market, like I could see Ekblad getting $8+ million a year. Like I could see someone, again, when you're a player who plays a lot of minutes on a team that's been to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals, like your value goes up. Teams love seeing that. When you lay out Connor McDavid with a great open ice hit in the Stanley Cup final, teams notice. So even if we think that might be an overpay or that there's risk because of, like you said, the miles and the wear and tear, someone will do it. Like someone's gonna fall in love with that resume.
how would you feel if it was Boston?
I wouldn't love it. I mean, I like Aaron Ekblad as a player. Obviously they could use help on the right side of their defense, but I think you can find it in a more affordable, more sensible direction than splurging for Aaron Ekblad and trying to be the highest bidder there.
Yeah, I mean, the help is needed up front so much so that it's hard to weigh that as like the risk reward to that is not a great not great for Boston, just because that money should go somewhere. Marco Sturm even talked about it in his introductory press conference, which was, I love the team. We need to fill in up front. So it just doesn't quite make sense for them right now.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, what's the phrase? Like one man's trash is another's treasure. Like I feel like the Bruins should be trying to find some players that are younger that didn't maybe fit somewhere else, or just their value just isn't through the roof at this point, as opposed to the veteran that's proven themselves. And really, there's only one way to go from there. It's kind of downwards, right? I don't think the Bruins should be marrying themselves to a long-term contract with Ekblad, given his mileage and injury history, despite how well of a player he is, how well he's playing right now for the Panthers in this moment. But that's right now in 2025. Going forward, it's not the same thing.
Yeah, I think another name worth throwing out here, because it started to make the rounds on social, but the big rumor out of Dallas has been that they might be willing to trade Jason Robertson, which seems kind of crazy to me, and I don't even know if the Bruins would be players there. I do like Robertson as a player, but the other one is that they would consider trading Mason Marchment, who has 1 year left, $4.5 million. And I saw Mark Divver tweeted, that he could see that being a fit for the Bruins and for Marco Sturm. I agree. I guess my hang up is he is only signed for 1 more year. He's 29. So are you then extending him? What does that extension look like? To me, if it's like 3 or 4 years, fine. I'm cool with that. If it's 6 or 7, I think I'd be a little worried, because he's another guy who, plays with some physicality, bigger body, 6'5", will give you, 20, 25 goals a year. So you're not talking about a top of the lineup guy, but he's also not getting paid like that. He's getting paid like a good third liner, which I think is exactly what he is.
Would love him on my team, especially if I knew that he was going to be around for more than just the 1 year at face value. Like you mentioned his traits, Scott, and yeah, he's a big bodied, he's a hard nosed player that would fit in nicely in your middle six. You wouldn't expect anything crazy from him, right? Can you get 20 goals, maybe 45 points? That's fine. My question is, what's the cost if you're trading for him? So I would have to know what that is before really saying, yeah, I like him, because I wouldn't want to give up too much for him,
Yeah, I agree. And that's where, like, I guess I would hope that maybe Dallas is viewing it more as a salary dump, because they do have to free up some money to keep some guys, some of their younger guys. So maybe there's not a bidding war where, it's 5 teams trying to one up each other. Maybe it is everyone kind of conservatively making offers because they know what Dallas's cap situation is, and you can get them kind of at a little bit of a discounted price. That's where I would be interested. Yeah, I don't think I would give up any real high-end valuable asset.
No, that's not a first round pick kind of a
definitely
trade.
not.
So yeah, that's definitely not, that would not be worth it, because you could use that. We talked about it last episode. Like, you have several first round picks out besides just the number 7 overall that have value, and you could use to get like a legitimate top
But
six
even
forward.
like a younger player, like a Poitras, like I wouldn't trade Poitras for him.
Yeah, I don't think I would either.
You know what I mean? So like it would have to just be a no-brainer type situation where, okay, yeah, we'll take his salary, but is the extension in place? And okay, yeah, it's like a mid-round pick or something, or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, the Robertson thing, I don't know. I don't get that. Why?
It's weird. It's like he had a really slow start this past year, and that was a big reason why he didn't make the 4 Nations team for USA. But then he had an awesome second half, gets injured at the very end of the regular season, misses a bunch of playoff games, wasn't all that effective when he did come back. And so it's like, I guess to an extent, I understand why there's maybe a little bit of sour feelings towards him at this point. But man, it's also like just 3 months ago, he was playing like I remember tracking, David Pastrnak like points since December 1st, and it was like him and Kucherov, but it was like Jason Robertson right behind them. Like, he was also on this incredible run for several months and ends up as the Stars' leading scorer on the season. And yeah, now apparently they're like down enough on him that they're thinking about trading him, which yeah is a little odd to me.
I mean, their future is not Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin. It's Rupe Hintz
Or
and
Matthew
Jason.
Shane, who's an unrestricted free
Right.
agent. Like,
Right. It's Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz, Wyatt Johnson. Like, that's I don't
Rantanen,
know.
obviously.
Yeah, of course. Yes, Rantanen too. Yeah, yeah.
Maybe they
Bridge,
know more about his injury than other people. No, like maybe they have an assessment of it. Who knows?
Jim Nill's a good. He's done a good job though. Like, he doesn't seem like a very emotional GM. He seems pretty calculated. So maybe there is something behind the scenes that we don't know, Bridget. To your point, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean he's 25. Like, he turns 26 next month.
I don't get it.
He's very much in his prime. Like, yeah, it would be pretty crazy to me.
Especially because they're in win now mode still, of course, right? Like, it's, I don't know, whatever. Bridget, did you have any final thoughts before we go into the mailbag questions?
No.
Scott, do you?
Nope. Let's go.
All right. Let's start off with Liz. And again, thank you all very much for submitting the questions. And she starts off with a coaching question. She says, with the hiring of Marco Sturm, I was wondering how a new coach gets up to speed on all the players that will be at training camp. Did you talk to Neely, Sweeney, prior coaches, Mouginel and Providence, etc.? Does he watch tape? Is he told by the Bees front office what positions they want players to play, etc.? Or will Sturm be able to go into it and do what he wants? Or will Sturm want to be a blank slate and not form any opinions until he has a chance to talk with all the players and see them on the ice? Let's start with that question, guys.
So I would say it's taking out like the last thing, the blank slate. It's really all of the above for everything else. Marcus Sturm is going to be well informed on all these players by the time training camp starts. He's not yet. He admitted as much at his press conference, but he's got 2.5 months or whatever to go here before training camp. So yeah, he'll talk to everyone Liz mentioned. Probably not as much Neil. He's not involved really in player development all that much, but like Sweeney, Adam McQuaid, Jamie Langenbrunner, Ryan Mujanel down in Providence, his assistant coaches who obviously are holdovers and have worked with a bunch of these guys. And then he's going to watch video himself and, start to form some of his own opinions. I would be surprised if his process is anything different than that. I just think head coaches want as much information on these guys as possible. So they're going to want to know, hey, here's some good things he's done. Here's, some of the things that have held him back at times or that we haven't loved. Here's how we see him playing or where we see him as a fit in the lineup. Like he'll get all those feedbacks, but then he will still form his own opinions. I think he'll have an open mind throughout training camp. But he'll have all the background info going in.
Yeah. I mean, I think he probably already has a decent grasp as a whole. Just you have to be prepared for your interviews. So, and he did talk about how he started to have conversations with some of the veteran guys. So we know he's done some groundwork in terms of getting to know getting to know players by talking to them. But we, as most people know, they're not all in Boston right now. So it's still going to be some time before he sees some of these guys face to face. And then it's going to require watching a lot of film, yes, and not just on the guys in Boston, but also the guys in Providence, because he's going to have an idea of the whole system, including some of the younger guys that maybe they try to assimilate into the roster. And, he could have different opinions of players than previous coaches, Sacco and Montgomery had. So yeah, there's a lot of homework to do. And this is the kind of situation where you never feel like you've done enough. It always feels like there's something more, some more video you should have watched, some more talking to a certain person you should have done. And I do think he's going to lean on guys like Bergeron and Chara. I wanted to mention this last episode. We ran out of time, but Bergeron was at his introductory press conference, and he looked at Bergeron and pointed at Bergeron during answering certain questions. And I just got the sense that he is going to be in contact with Bergeron a lot, because Bergeron is the bridge between him and Pastrnak and McAvoy and the guys that Bergeron played with that are still on the Bruins. He's got the ability to bridge them, be somebody that Sturm can talk to. Okay, how does this guy operate? Is Pastrnak going to respond negatively or positively if you do this or different things? He knows these players. He is going to be a really good tool for Sturm to lean on in order to bridge that gap and to maybe speed up the learning process of what these guys are like, what coaching works, what they would respond negatively to, all of that. And Chara, we know, is already in an advisory role. So I feel like those two guys will be people that could help Sturm in terms of getting to know what the best way to coach certain guys is.
Yep, absolutely. And yes, I do believe it's all of the above. And first and foremost, Marco Sturm, he has seen these Bruins players in action before throughout the league, whether it was on Boston or on teams prior to coming to Boston. I mean, he was on the LA Kings bench for 4 years. So we saw a lot of Elias Lindholm in person up close, saw a lot of Nikita Zadorov. So he's not unfamiliar with he saw a lot of Hampus Lindholm, I'm sure, in Anaheim. So he's not unfamiliar with a lot of these core players in Boston. And he certainly has watched, some more tape and some more film on these players. I think, he talked in his press conference and then his radio appearance across the street later in the day. He mentioned just he knows that Lori had a really bad plus minus. He knows that Casey Middlestat has another level to get to. He knows that Jeremy Swayman struggled. He knows what needs to improve with the players on the roster and systematically for the team. The biggest question right now for Marco Sturm that's really preventing him from doing his job fully is not knowing which players the Bruins might trade for or acquire via unrestricted free agency. So until he knows that, which we're only about, I don't know, 4 weeks away from, I'd say that once we're into the second week of July, we should have a really good idea of what this roster should be. Obviously, things can trickle later into the summer, and then there'll probably be some training camp spots to be won. But until he knows his full roster, he won't be able to fully get his hands around everything. But I think to this point, he's probably done as much as he can and is continuing to do so, obviously.
Is it going to be another one of those years where Scott's riding on 4th of July and his 4th of July celebrations are ruined?
I hope not.
Well, I mean, knock on wood, but the Bruins don't do that. I mean, most famously, they traded Tyler Seguin on July 4th, but usually Don Sweeney has been has his checklist and gets it done on July 1. Like, I wonder if that shifts at all this year, but usually they go in with right or wrong, like swing or miss, but they go in with a clear plan on July 1st and get their moves done quickly. So usually by 5 p.m. on July 1st, you have a pretty good idea what the team's going to look like. Usually anything after that is kind of smaller moves. Obviously, the 1 year you were waiting for Bergeron and Krejci was a little different, but yeah, they're not ones to wait around and see, oh, who's left after the first day of free agency, who can we maybe get at a value. Like, the way Don Sweeney is operated is he has a list of targets, and as soon as 12 o'clock hits, noon on July 1, it's on the phone. Here's our offer. Can we get a deal done?
Do you guys expect that to be the case this year? Usually all the big ticket guys go on July 1. We're not really waiting, to your point, Scott. Have you guys heard some speculation about this year? Maybe free agency drags on a little bit longer of a process for certain players?
Well, the reason I could see it drag on a little longer is if Mitch Marner is sort of holding a bidding war for himself. If Mitch Marner drags out his choice, then there's going to be dominoes that don't fall right away after that, because anyone who decides to prioritize Mitch Marner and thinks they're in the running is going to wait for him to make a decision before they pivot to someone else. So those secondary guys that they would pivot to, they might also, unless they get blown away by someone else on day one who says, you know what, we're not going after Mitch Marner, we're going to prioritize Nick Ehlers, and Ehlers signs with them because that team prioritizes him. But you could easily see Ehlers wait, Besser wait to see where Marner goes. So because there's a Mitch Marner this year, and usually there's not, if he takes his time, then I could see free agency slowing down a bit. But I could also see him knowing on July 1 where he goes. He might already have a team in mind, and we know, whether they're supposed to or not, these teams and agents talk behind the scenes and through back channels, right? When you see a guy sign at 12:15, that deal didn't get negotiated between 12 and 12:15. They were already talking through intermediaries.
Yeah, that would make sense though, Brian. So hey, 4th of July, Scott writing that the Bruins got Mitch Marner. No? Yes, no?
Hey, that was my priority for the offseason. I would do it.
Okay, let's move on to Kelly. Kelly asked, I enjoyed your shot at being GM for a day, saying that, put your hats on again. Would you be willing to give up your first round selection this year in a package for Marty Necas? Myself, I would rather do that than pay a crazy amount for a Besser or Ehlers. Thanks. Keep up the great work. I'll just say quickly before you guys give your opinion, again, similar to what Scott said with Mason Marshman, Necas has 1 year left in his contract before he becomes a UFA. So for me, any deal for Marty Necas, you have to know that there's an extension. It's either a sign and trade or you know that there's an extension in place. If there's not, you can't give up what it would cost to get Necas if you're going to risk losing him the following year. And as we've seen with Mikko Rantanen and clearly Marty Necas, who isn't too happy in Colorado, these players might not always be afraid to bounce around until they end up where they want to be.
Yeah, so you would have to know that Boston is a place he wants to be. Like you said, extension has to be in place. You don't make the trade and then talk to him. Like, you have that deal basically ready to go, ready to sign, like the Bruins did with Hampus Lindholm when where he signed an extension like right after the trade. So if there is a deal in place, do I trade 7 overall for Necas? I'm going to be honest. I keep going back and forth on this because he's 26. He even with the weirdness of this season and playing 2 different teams, he ends up with 83 points. Like, had a really good season. He's broken 70 points in other years, pushing 30 goals. Like, I really like the players. He's one of the fastest players in the NHL. So if you want to play with pace, like, very few do it like Marty Necas. I think I would, because the chances of the 7th overall pick turning into a player as good as Necas it's not impossible at all. Like, Jake O'Brien could end up being better than Necas and as a natural center. Because that's another part of the Necas conversation is, excuse me, there had been rumors like a couple years ago that he wanted to play center and wasn't getting that chance in Carolina. Well, he's still not getting that chance. He didn't play center in Colorado either. Personally, I don't see him as a center. I think he's better off staying at wing. But yeah, I think push comes to shove. If I have an extension in place, I think I'd do it, but I could also see an argument against it.
Do you think that you would have to give the 7th overall pick if you're the Bruins, or could you give them one of next year's first round picks?
I think it would probably have to be set. Like, Colorado would push hard for 7 this year. If you can do it with a future first, then even better. Then I'm definitely in. But I feel like it would probably have to be 7.
Well, it would probably have to be a future Boston pick, because if it's a future first round pick from Toronto or Florida that the Bruins have acquired recently, those are going to be bottom 10 first round picks most likely. And Colorado would know that. So Colorado would probably hedge on wanting Boston's future first round pick and hoping that the Bruins have a mid round pick or better. And in that situation, like Scott said last episode, that would take away the Bruins' ability to offer sheet people, because now one of their own picks is going away. That would still be true with number 7 this year. It's tough. The number 7 is tough because I would be more okay with it depending on how the board falls, right? Like, when Scott mentions Jake O'Brien might get drafted 4th overall, and he might not go to the Bruins anyway, right? And so it's like, okay, so maybe I'm passing up on Caleb Desnoyers or Roger McQueen or Brady Martin for Marty Necas. And Caleb Desnoyers, I like him a lot. I watch him, and there's something about him that he doesn't have the offensive ceiling, I don't think, as some of the other players around him. Like, I think Jake O'Brien, I think he has a potentially better offensive ceiling in the NHL. But Caleb Desnoyers, I could see him being just a really good second liner, or I don't know. So maybe I would be more likely to give up the 7th overall pick if somebody that I want the Bruins to get, might go before them anyway. It's tough to know, because you're trading this pick away before you know how the board falls, I guess is my point.
Yeah, but by the way, like, Desnoyers is another guy where you end the season with just like a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth. Now, he was banged up, so that's part of it, but like, he dominates the QMJHL playoffs, like 2 points a game, just taking over. And then you get into the Memorial Cup, tougher competition, and he doesn't do a whole lot. And he was banged up. I think he's fine now, but he was a little injured at that point. So like I'm sure that was a factor. But it was also kind of like some people's worst fear, which is like, all right, when you get him out of the queue, which is a little bit of an easier league, like, is he going to struggle? And in 3 games or whatever it was, again, very small sample, but yeah, like it looked much tougher on him.
Yeah, because when we're talking CHL leagues, I think and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's, if we're talking quality of play, it's OHL, WHL, Q.
Yeah, I'd say that's generally the consensus.
So and I've talked about that. We've talked about that with these prospects. I don't know. I'm not trying to take away from Caleb Desnoyers, but when you see what somebody like Jake O'Brien is, which is a prospect I've been talking about for months now, what he's done at the OHL level, and they're in the same range, and a lot of people were talking for a while that Desnoyers is clearly the better I'm like, how can we look at their numbers and say that, or just watch their play? I mean, they're all great prospects, but we've talked about this for a long time. There's no consensus. So, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, if O'Brien falls to the Bruins at 7, like I would like them to take him, right? But if he goes at 4, I'm like, okay, then yeah, I'll take Necas over maybe Desnoyers or McQueen or Martin. I don't know. That's why it's tricky, because you're giving these picks away before you know how the board falls, like I said. So, but I think.
I mean, are you saying, Brian, that maybe you see it being like, all right, Bruins are on the clock, and we're all sitting around our TV, and Scott and I are probably sitting at TV Garden, right? Is that where we're going to be for that? Because Sweeney and Neely will
either the Garden or Warrior. They haven't told us yet.
So we'll be wherever they are for the press conference that will follow, but we'll all be sitting there watching the clock, and then all of a sudden, from a room over, Don Sweeney will trade the 7th overall pick for Marty Necas because he doesn't like what's left on the board. Is that what you're saying, Brian? Like the last minute, like you're on the clock, you're like,
well, no, because now not necessarily, because now Colorado sees the same options available, and maybe they don't want who's left.
Well, right, and like if that were the trade, if it's number 7 for Necas, Colorado might want him. Wait, they might have certain guys in mind, and if they're not there, they say, you know what, like didn't break the way we want. We're not.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So you'd have to trade that pick before the first.
Well, no, I'm saying I think Colorado would maybe want to wait until draft night to make that trade. So like the Bruins could offer number 7 now, and Colorado could say, get back to us on draft night. We'll see how the board falls.
Well, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay. Yeah, I mean,
like Colorado might not want to trade for a pick if they think there's a chance that no one they love is going to fall there.
Right. Okay. So, like, for example, like maybe a Frondell or a Higgins is available around 7, and they're like, okay, you want to talk now, Bruins? Maybe something like that.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. A lot of options. Well, if the deal was to be struck before draft night, I think I'd probably fall with Scott. Like I think I'd probably do it. But it's a very difficult call to make. It really is. Bridget, what about you?
I have reservations about him. I just, with the history of him when he was going through his restricted free agency and now wanting to be out of another organization, it's just, it just makes you pause for a second and go, okay, well, what if he does the same thing when he gets
maybe he's waiting to go to an East Coast city that's as close to the Atlantic Ocean as possible, so we can
his Czech friends,
home with his Czech friends in Boston as line mates. I mean, I can see, all joking aside, I can see Boston being a place you'd want to go to, but obviously we don't know exactly what his values are. Okay. Moving along to the next question, which is from Brian R. And Brian asked a question about, speaking of the draft, he asked a question about, was it Porter Martone, Scott? I believe. Let's see here. Reading Corey Pronman's Draft Confidential column in The Athletic, it seems like the top 7 of the draft could be picked out of a hat, although Schaefer's floor seems to be number 2. If even with all the centers out there and the Bruins' big need at center ice, I'm warming up to Porter Martone if he falls to number 7. It might be an advantage to have your top 2 forwards, assuming Martone works out at right wing. So now he's talking about Pastrnak and Martone down the line, allowing you to find the best match at center for each one. Say Geeky with Pasta and Eichel with Martone by 2026. One bonus of picking Martone would be that it would close the door on overpaying playoff ghost Mitch Marner. What are your guys' thoughts on Martone? I don't recall you talking in as much depth about him as about the other center iceman, and that's exactly right. We definitely have not talked about Martone as much, and it's for that reason. The positional need is more so at center for the Bruins, and even beyond that, probably left wing, because you do have David Pastrnak as your top line right wing. But yeah, I mean, he raises a good point as far as like maybe you can just match your centers according to having a strong wing. But again, I think relying on Jack Eichel coming to Boston in 2026, I think it's just a fool's errand.
Yeah, that part of the plan is wishful thinking, but it could be, some other center who shakes loose. I guess just sticking to Martone and leaving out like future planning around centers. I really like Martone. And if he falls to 7 and the Bruins have him as the best player available, and maybe they're not, whoever's left for centers, maybe they don't love him as much as we think they might, right? Like maybe the Bruins don't love O'Brien, Martin, McQueen, or they just like them, but maybe they really love Porter Martone. Like maybe they go into the draft and he's number 3 or 4 in their big board. I would be totally fine with them taking him, because I think that's good value, even if he's not a position of need. I do think he's a top 5 player in this draft. I think the one weakness is his skating. He's not a great skater. He doesn't play with a ton of pace, and that's a fair concern, but he is a great playmaker. He gets to dirty areas. He's 6'3", 208. Very talented with the puck on his stick. Like people call him a power forward, and he is, but I think that gives people the idea of like banging, crashing forward who scores a bunch of greasy goals at the net front. He can do that, but he's also like a legitimately high-end playmaker, passer, great vision, hockey IQ. And that's really what separates him and puts him into this high in the top 10 conversation. I think there are times where his effort maybe wanes a little bit, and you'd like to see him more engaged physically or more engaged defensively. So I'm not saying he's a perfect prospect. There are things to highlight as potential concerns, but I really like him. I really like his talent. I think he's like going to be like a lock to play in the top 6 and produce in the NHL, and he has the potential to put up a lot of points.
Yeah, if he falls, I can see the possibility that Don Sweeney looks at the board and we talked about how center heavy the top 10 is, so there's going to be centers available at 7. But I can see him looking at the board and saying, you know what, we said we were going to draft best available, and it just so happens that Porter Martone is the best available after falling to 7, because we had him in our mock draft. I believe this was Brian's pick, San Jose picking him at 3rd, which, by the way, San Jose is not even, is that what they're picking? Yeah.
They're picking 2nd now.
They're second now. So Porter Martone, we had in our top 3, going top 3. So for him to drop to 7 might be a little bit of a reach, but if people are going centers, if they have centers that they want and they think they need a center, and Porter Martone falls, then I don't hate that pick for the Bruins. And they, as most franchises will say and will do, picking best player available is normally the way to go. So if you think he's best available of the guys that are left there, then yeah, that I could see it happening, even though he's not a center, and I could see the backlash, the negative tweets. Oh, you needed a center. You drafted a winger. Of course you did. That's what the Bruins do. But yeah, you shouldn't dismiss it if you're a fan that thinks that way, like immediately, because if that's the best option you got there, then you take it.
Well, on the flip side too is that there are some quote unquote centers that are projected to go high. They may end up being wings in the NHL for all we know. Like Anton Frandel could end up becoming a winger. Michael Misa may end up being a winger. Like Hagens appears to be a true center, right?
But even that, like I've heard people who think he ends up on the wing.
Yeah,
I don't. I disagree with that. But yeah, you're right. A lot. Brady Martin, people think might be more effective as
exactly. Yeah, another one. Like Denwye. I think Denwye should be a center. Like he's a straight up center mold. But O'Brien too, I think. But yeah, on Martone, I agree with you guys. If he would have fallen to 7, I think there's a real conversation to be had there, especially if somebody like if Martone falls to 7 because O'Brien's selected ahead of him and Denwye is selected ahead of him and Frondell and Hagens. Like if it's between Martin and Martone and McQueen, like I think you probably go Martone there. I just don't see him dropping that far. And when I look at the draft board, yeah, we all know the Bruins need that center ice, but they don't. Not all of these lottery teams share that same need as Boston, at least as urgently. Like for example, yeah, the Islanders they could use a center. The Sharks, they I don't know. I mean, Misa's gonna go and Schaefer's gonna go top 2. So let's just go to Chicago. Chicago, you have Connor Bedard. So I could see them going for Martone there. If Utah selects a number 4, and I say if because there's chatter about them potentially trading it away. But you obviously have Logan Cooley as your number 1 center going forward. So they could use a big winger there in Martone. So I think once you get to Philly, Nashville, Boston, obviously those 3 teams could use a center more than anything, but I just don't see Martone falling to 5. But if he does, then yeah, it gets interesting.
Yeah, I could see Nashville taking him at 5 too if he's there, because they just need offensive talent. And so if they think like they could use a center, but like almost regardless of position. So I think if they think Martone's the best offensive player on the board, I could easily see him going there. And
same for Philly, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing for them as it is for the Bruins. The Bruins have a center need; they have center need. So if the Bruins could take Martone if he's available, they might take Martone if he's available. All right, let's move along to a question we got from, and is it Amac Deasy?
That's what I would go with
on Blue Sky. Blue Sky. What exactly is Blue Sky, Scott?
So it launched, I don't know, a little while ago as an alternative to X/Twitter. A lot of people created accounts. As far as I can tell, it hasn't taken off quite the way I think a lot of people hoped, but I am on there. So if people want to send me questions on there, same handle as Twitter, SMcLaughlin9. The reason I wanted to get to this one is I actually missed it initially because I don't go on Blue Sky all that often. But I will check if people send stuff.
All right. So Amac DZ meant to ask a few weeks ago about an interview DJ Bean did where it was mentioned that Nikita Zadorov might have been a locker room issue this year. Want to hear your thoughts. Listen to the Skate Pod every show. If you ever want to cover that, I'd love to know. Okay, so is Amac DZ referring to when Zadorov was on What Chaos with DJ and Pete, or is this a different interview?
No, so I think this was something different because I actually texted DJ about this because I didn't have the full context, so I just wanted him to clarify. He made a comment about how basically he had heard that Zadorov, there were times this year where Zadorov seemed to think he was more of a leader than maybe some teammates viewed him as, kind of like maybe overstepping his bounds type thing at times, which I think is fair. And I think is a little different than directly calling him a locker room issue. And I think, Bridget, you might remember this. At one point this season, Zadorov actually kind of alluded to something like this himself. He said that, so the way he framed it was, he said, I think guys didn't get some of my jokes when I first got here. And he basically had to like almost recalibrate and like get to know the room and his teammates more and figure out what landed. Like I can see that also applying to his leadership style. Like there might have been times where like he steps up to speak and guys are like, wait, huh? Like what? Why is Zadorov talking right now? Like I can see that. I can see that as, look, Zadorov is kind of this alpha personality. Like he's a big presence, not just on the ice and not just because he's a big guy, but because like that's how he's wired. He's a talker, he's loud, he will call people out, and I can absolutely see how in year one with a new team that might occasionally misfire or rub guys the wrong way. So I wouldn't go as far as to say he was a locker room issue, but I definitely think it's fair to say there are probably times that stuff like that happened.
Yeah, I never got the sense that he was a locker room issue. I think he's a big personality, and I think that he naturally wants to and feels comfortable talking in situations as a leader. And I believe breakup day he mentioned like when he lumped himself into the leadership group because he's older, he's a veteran, and he that's just his personality is like he's going to talk in certain situations in the locker room. I never viewed it as a negative thing when he talked, but I could see maybe players needing to get to know you first before you can really fully be yourself in that way. Especially if you're the new guy and maybe you're coming across as not not understanding something because people think they've been there longer. Who knows? I don't think he was a locker room problem at all. I do think now that he does have a year with the Bruins, you'll see him be even more vocal and be even more of a leader. I think he kind of just naturally assimilated into that kind of role. And that just seems like who he is. So we'll see if it seems like he's part of and I would say like Hampus Lindholm too, like because these are guys that are older that have been around the league a little bit longer. So like it's a wider group of leaders that we're talking about. We're not talking about like captaincy, but we're talking about guys that probably or may not wear a letter that are also talking in the room.
So I think when we had Pierre Maguire on last summer, he mentioned that Zadorov is loved by teammates and coaches. He just has some issues sometimes with coachability or just putting things together consistently. So, for what it's worth, prior to coming to Boston, I do believe that he was not somebody who had a reputation of being a teammate that wasn't liked. Obviously, he had like some sort of infamous joke with Nathan McKinnon about his dietary restrictions or something like that. I think he said like in an interview back home that got I forget what it was, but to Bridget and Scott's point, he's a big personality. And certainly if somebody walks into a room, and I'm not saying he did this, but if anybody walks into a room and is just constantly, speaking up and talking down to people, obviously that could wear on people, and rub people the wrong way. But I will say, if there was anybody in that locker room that took any issue with a first year player in Boston speaking up ever and ruffling their eyebrows and saying, why is Zadorov talking right now? He just got here. To me, that's a problem because that is the opposite culture that Zdeno Chara instilled in Boston and Patrice Bergeron. You're talking about guys in Chara who didn't want to use the term and refer to people as rookies because it doesn't matter who you are, how long you've been in the league, how long you've been in the Bruins, everybody's voice matters. So obviously we don't know the details. We don't know how outspoken certain people are or how people took things the wrong way. But if there was any sort of hey, pal, get in line because we've been here before and who are you to tell us anything? That is something that if that was ever in that room, it needs to go, because to me, that is a bad culture. And there should be no egos or entitlement in that room. I'm not saying that there is or there was, but if people were pissed off at Zadorov because he came to Boston and was just trying to do his part to lead, and maybe it was I don't know, misinterpreted. Like, okay, I don't like hearing if he was trying to make a good faith effort, a little bit of a strong personality, and people just didn't want to hear him because he hasn't been there for a while. I hope that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I don't think it's so much that, like, I mean, look, we heard the year before about Kevin Shattenkirk speaking up and talking, and that was his first year in Boston, and that went over really well. Like, that played well in that room. But
he is also much like he's older. Like
yeah, but it could also be a situation where, like, did Shattenkirk run it by the captains first to make sure, like, hey guys, is it all right if I speak up here? And maybe Zadorov just went for it, and like Marchand, Pastrnak, McAvoy kind of caught off guard. Like, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes there's like a little bit of like a reporting structure to these things.
I'm not sure why that would upset. I'm not sure why, unless Zadorov was just some complete asshole constantly. I don't know why, as a captain or an assistant captain, like, you would have to give permission to somebody to speak ever. Like, time and a place, I get it. Like, if it's a big game, like, let the captain speak. And communication is important, but I'm just saying, like, guys talk all the time. Like, let's go, boys. Let's pick it up. Like, I just don't see that being stepping on. If that shouldn't be stepping on toes. If people think that that's stepping on their toes as a leader, that's a little bit sensitive to me. But we don't know the details, obviously.
I do think that there's something to, when you're new, you kind of sit back and watch for a little bit, like, and then you pick your spots, and then you kind of like assimilate in. So, like, obviously, there's such a social balance to it that you just have to try to time it right, and strike the right chords at the right time, and that's what a good leader normally figures out how to do. My thoughts on just being around him, talking to him this year, seeing how he interacts with people, is that, like, one of the biggest characteristics of him would just be, like, passionate. He's very passionate about winning, playing right. He's very black and white on what he sees as, like, the right and wrong thing to do. Like, he's got the old school hockey culture mentality as, like, his guidelines for, and I think that, like, really at the end of the day, he wants the team to do as well as possible, and he really cares about, if he messes up, he's mad at himself. If someone else messes up, like, he'll probably seems like some of the one of the guys that might say something, but I can see him, now that he's got a year under his belt, being more involved, because he's now, like, kind of more comfortable. And I think that this question probably also has something to do with that time that Swayman tried to fight. You guys remember this, when Swayman went for a fight and he said, oh, he was trying to stick up for his teammate, and Zadorov post game said, is that what he was trying to do? And, like, kind of shrugged it in a different direction. So I think that is where that idea kind of popped up from. And then he came back a few days later and said, like, he didn't mean it. He doesn't have any problem with Swayman or anything like that. But I think that plays into where the question comes from as well.
Yeah, and for sure, I look at Zadorov, and last year I just didn't really think that effort was much of an issue with him. I think that if you have a guy who's 6'6", 7, whatever he is, 50, 60 pounds, if that presence can set the physical tone on the ice, and he wants to be a vocal presence in the room, that's probably a voice that, like, that Bruins locker room should have probably embraced. And yeah, maybe he's a bit of a interesting cat, but the team sucked last year from start to finish. So if anybody wanted to speak up and assert themselves, I just don't see why that would. I'm glad somebody was trying to, do something about things. It's tough not being in the room. I just don't, if he's here for a while, he's here for a while.
Yeah.
So if there were issues, they got to figure it out.
Yeah, and I just think, like, it's possible for someone to have good intentions and mostly be a positive force, but also have some missteps. And like,
Sure.
yeah, Bridget's right to bring that. Like, that was a pretty public one. Like, there was basically a non-story, right? Like, no one would have lost their minds about Swayman trying to fight. They might have criticized him for giving up goals in the third period and the Bruins losing that game against LA. But the initial reaction, like everyone on Twitter was having fun with that. Like,
Oh yeah,
people wanted to see him fight. And then all of a sudden it becomes a story because Nikita Zadorov makes those comments post game. And like that, if you're going to be a leader of the team, like that is part of it. Like, don't invite stories about any kind of locker room disconnect that you then have to clean up 2 days later the next time you talk to the media. Like, that is also part of being a team leader, is like knowing how to manage that stuff and not let your post-game emotions get the best of you.
Agreed. Separate conversation regarding Swayman being a team leader is not being a distraction all off season, having a shit season, and then trying to be Jordan Binnington every 2 seconds trying to fight guys. So I'm sure Zadorov was probably
let
seeing
him have
that too.
one, okay? Let him have one.
No, I mean, no. How about he plays well?
We disagree. Hard disagree.
I care more about the guy playing well than they getting in a fight. Like, I'm all for fights, but
it's part of his career bucket list. We all have them.
No, because we all sat here for years and shit on Jordan Binnington for doing the same shit. I'm not gonna
Yeah, but
sit
he
there
does
and
it like 10 times a year. He tries that shit all the time.
watch Swayman when he's not playing well. He's always trying to get in people's face, and if you're stopping the puck, that's great. If you're not, you're just being a clown. So
we all have bucket lists, Brian. Okay.
Well, okay.
So, and but my stipulation is it's got to be at the Garden so that I'm there.
Yeah. Whatever. Anyway, I just think leadership was clearly an issue for the most part last season for the Bruins. I thought Pastrnak was a big leader, which is a different conversation, because we all sat here after the season saying, you know what, I think that if the Bruins would hand out a C, it might go to David Pastrnak, or it should. And I'm getting the vibes that, or I think I saw somewhere that, and obviously it sucks to bring that up and not know where I saw it, but I thought I saw somewhere that the Bruins might envision McAvoy being that guy for them. I forget who I saw right there.
There are those comments from
Rick.
Oh, maybe that
were shared by an opposing broadcaster. I'm forgetting the team. I'm forgetting who the broadcaster was, but mentioned on the opposing broadcast, like just kind of casual. It was like, I talked to Andy Brickley before the game, and he said the Bruins envision Charlie McAvoy being their captain going forward. And it's like, well, Brick's never said that. So,
but he did actually. Brick was asked about it later, on a podcast with Nesson, I think, and he said that if it was up to him, I think he said he might make it Charlie.
He framed it that time. He framed it as his opinion. That other broadcaster shared it like Brick had some like inside info.
Right. But Brick knows,
which he probably does, by the way. So
Brick knows how those guys think up on that ninth floor. So I wouldn't be surprised. That's why when Brick says that, I'm like, okay, then maybe Don feels the same way, or Cam, or whomever. So
we never, in our mock GM, our mock off season, we didn't pick a captain. But
no,
I personally like what I see from Pastrnak. Like, that would be my pick.
Somebody, it may have been Sturm, but somebody made a comment about how it's such an important decision in the organization that they have to know that it's the right guy, and that person wants that responsibility. It could be that Pastrnak really just like doesn't want to be the captain. And maybe they know that, and maybe Charlie is more willing to be that role for them off the ice. But
sometimes that makes the best captain, right? Like, so, in throughout history, like sometimes the best king is the one who doesn't want to be king. Best president is the one who doesn't want to be president.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Watching way too much Game of Thrones. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, guys, let's get to one last question from Roger, and then we can wrap things up. Okay. Roger says, I'm pretty optimistic about the upcoming season for the Bruins. I think the team's success this coming season will depend on three things happening: a return to better health for the two Lindholms, McAvoy, and Kastelik, Swayman and Korpisalo or his replacement playing into their potential, and management and the new coach, which we now know as Marco Sturm, finding a well-functioning second line, even if they can't land Mitch Marner to take some of the pressure off Pasternak's line. If two or three of these above things happen, I think the Bruins will be a real contender to get back into the playoffs. What do you think are the most important areas on the team that need to be addressed?
Yeah, I mean, I think Roger nailed it. Like, that is more or less the checklist. Like, Charlie McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm have to be really good to great. Charlie McAvoy has to, like, again, if we're talking about getting back to the playoffs and having any chance of making noise, like, Charlie McAvoy should be one of the 10 best defensemen in the NHL, and Hampus Lindholm should probably be one of the 20 to 25 best. Elias Lindholm. Obviously, Elias Lindholm played every game, but we know he was dealing with a back issue. But yeah, you're going to need him to bounce back. Addressing the second line, absolutely. You can't be a one-line team and have any real level of success, especially when the one line you have has, with all due respect, like Elias Lindholm and Morgan Geekie on it. It's not like we're talking about Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl together as your one line. Like, you can have a good first line with David Pastrnak and those guys, but it's not a truly elite one. So yes, you need the secondary scoring behind them. What was and Swayman bouncing back is self-explanatory. To me, I've said it before, that's number one. Like, that is the single biggest thing that has to happen this season is Jeremy Swayman just needs to be a lot better.
Yeah, I think that it starts there. It basically, on paper, remember when we started the beginning of this season, we made our predictions. Like, on paper, the Bruins defense and goaltending should have been some of like the staunchest in the league. It was their strength going into the season, just basing it off of what Swayman had done so far in his career, and how solid those guys were that make up the Bruins back end. They need to play up to that this season, which it is if they're healthy, and especially Lindholm, who I really hope his knee is better. He's had a lot of time to heal, and but it did certainly, there was certainly complications to his situation with his knee. So if he can get back to his full strength, back to the way he was before, I really like Hampus Lindholm as a player. I think he's a very good defenseman. I think he's very valuable to your team. So missing him was huge. And goes without saying, McAvoy being healthy is also incredibly important. But that defensive stuff is going to be huge. And Marco Sturm, he briefly mentioned this in his press conference. He coaches very defensively sound teams. Like, his team structure certainly starts with defense. And they're talking about like defensively responsible forwards as well, but his systems are like his coach teams are normally very good defensively, and that's what he tries to structure around.
Yep, absolutely. And special teams, of course. Special teams is, oh man, in 2025's NHL, it's so important, and you're going to be buried if both your special teams units are bottom 10 in the league. So if the Bruins can get back to middle of the pack in both categories, right, power play and penalty kill, that should be a good base to keep themselves afloat in the playoff race for sure, right? Obviously, middle of the pack, there's room for improvement there too, right? You could be top 10, but given what we saw last year, I'm not going to give them that expectation right now. So let's baby steps.
Given the fact that they traded away guys on power play and PK, and we don't know who they're replacing them with yet in free agency. So,
yeah, I mean, especially in the regular season, like sometimes you get to the playoffs, there's fewer penalties, a little less special teams time. Although even that has changed in recent years. But yeah, I mean, how many times last season did we come on here and we're like, they lost because of special teams. Like their power play went 0 for 4, or they gave up a shorthanded goal. Like it can just be backbreaking. I mean, for a long stretch, it fell off at the end, but for a long stretch of last season, they were kind of more or less breaking even at 5-on-5. Like they're middle of the pack or maybe towards 20th. But really until the trade deadline, they weren't one of the worst 5-on-5 teams. They were one of the worst special teams.
Yeah.
And that it just cost them so many points. And like, if you're not going to be elite, like you got to at least be middle of the pack to at least where it allows you to stay in games and doesn't cost you games.
I mean, so many times last year, the penalty kill was brutal too, but they get a power play and they would lose the opening draw. It would get iced, and then they would spend a minute and 30 seconds trying to regain entry. They would fail, and then maybe the second unit would get out there and maybe get 15 seconds of zone time, maybe get one shot off at best. Like it was just brutal hockey to watch. It was so boring, killed momentum far too often on most nights. So that's going to improve big time.
And this is something that like they have a lot to replace.
Oh,
like,
there it is.
There's my alarm.
There's your episodic
wrap it up.
That's my alarm. But no, they traded away a lot of guys from their PK, right? Like Coyle was a great PKer, Martian was a great PKer, Carlo was out there taking up a lot of time. Like Frederick killed penalties, and then obviously Marchand
the year before.
What?
DeBrusk the year before was a good penalty killer for them too.
And then Marchand on the power play, and Coyle was on PP2 a lot. Like those are holes that we haven't seen filled yet. So not only were the special teams not good last year, like they could be even worse if you don't fill in the personnel that you lost in those spots.
And if you don't have the coaching, again, like this assistant coach hire is going to be important because we think it's going to be a power play specialist, and that they need that. They need some fresh ideas, fresh approach, new voice, like that. If they get that right, that should help. But you miss on that, then you're back to square one.
All right. I think that probably wraps it up for this episode. We're an hour and a half in just about. Bridget and Scott, thank you guys for your time. Thanks to all the listeners for submitting your questions. Hope everybody has a wonderful weekend, and happy Father's Day on Sunday to all the fathers out there listening. So happy Father's Day to my father, Bridget, and Scott, of course, yours as well. So thank you very much, and we'll talk to you on Monday. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.